All right, folks, thank you very much for coming along this evening. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge that I and the people in this room are on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I thank elders past, present, and emerging for having us here and looking after this beautiful land. My name's Andrew Martin. I'm Distinguished Scholar for the New South Wales Institute for Educational Research. And tonight the Institute is once again delighted to hold the annual Sir Harold Wyndham Memorial Lecture. A little bit about Sir Harold. I think it's fair to say that well, certainly in 1945, he was a member of the Australian delegation to a conference that brought about the establishment of UNESCO. He was Director General of Education in New South Wales from 1952 to 1961 and considered one of the most influential educators of the 20th century. His most marked achievement, I think it's fair to say, was the formulation of what became known as the Wyndham scheme. And that was based on a report of a committee that he appointed, where he proposed the comprehensive school. And the comprehensive school was aimed to cater for all abilities, but could also accommodate individual differences. W.C. Radford, who was the director of ACER, in an address to the Carnegie Corporation in 1964, remarked that of all the post-war directors of education, Wyndham had, quote unquote, made the greatest contribution to constructive knowledge and change and development. And so Sir Harold's commitment to research and education led to his appointment to become patron of our institute, New South Wales Institute for Educational Research, from 1973 to 1988. And the Sir Harold Wyndham Memorial Lecture was inaugurated by our institute in 1989 to honour his name and has been given by leading educators in years since. Tonight we have such an educator, Associate Professor Danny Liu. Danny is a molecular biologist by training, programmer by night, researcher and academic developer by day, so he does not sleep, and is an educator at heart. A multiple international and national teaching award winner, he works at the confluence of learning analytics, student engagement, educational technology, and professional development and leadership. And what a confluence in today. He's Associate Professor in the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Education portfolio at this institution, the University of Sydney, where he leads staff across the institution in educational innovation and the effective use of learning analytics and artificial intelligence to improve student learning. He co-chairs the university's AI in Education Working Group and is an active public intellectual in this space. This evening, Danny will dive into the tricky and exciting territory of generative AI. As noted, he's a leading public intellectual in the role of generative AI in education, and I can think of no better way to tie our institute's long history of educational research to such a topical and timely challenges and opportunities we have facing us this very day. I welcome Professor Liu to deliver the 2023 Sir Harold Wyndham Memorial Lecture. Thank you, Danny.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Thanks so much for coming in the room and also online today. I'm going to try and shift my gaze between the camera and online and in the Zoom and in the room so I can see everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to give this lecture today. I have to be honest, when Andrew emailed me initially, I thought he emailed the wrong person, so I didn't reply to him for about a week thinking, you know, what's going on here? What, has he accidentally emailed the wrong Danny? But then after chatting with him, I think it became clear that it's an interesting problem we all face in education now, the society faces around artificial intelligence. So the next thing I did after replying to Andrew is that I do what people usually do these days and ask ChatGPT for help. So I've been asked to give a memorial lecture. What on earth do I do? And ChatGPT, as it does, it gave me quite a useful summary of what I should do. I'm just going to dim the lights so that you can see the screen better in the room. So I was feeling overwhelmed. It helped me to feel not overwhelmed. Public speaking is a significant honor, and I appreciate this opportunity. So Harold Wyndham, Andrew introduced, was a great educationalist. He was born in Forbes in 1903 to a father who hadn't had the opportunity to go through primary school, to go to high school. He'd had a primary school education, and he was a grocer in Forbes. He met Sir Harold's mother in Forbes, Agnes Euphemia Finnegan, and then they had Sir Harold, and then unfortunately his mum died in 1908, after which they moved to Sydney and actually settled in Kensington. After a time in Kensington, he went to then Fort Street Boys High School, and he studied after Fort Street. He studied at the University of Sydney. And at the University of Sydney, he was able to come here because of a Teachers College scholarship. He did a BA, and then he also did a DipEd, and also did an MA. He had a keen interest in things like psychology, in education, in history, and also in writing, and also in educational measurement, which he picked up around that time as well. Then he taught at the Sydney Teachers College for a few years, and then also at North Newtown Practice School. And then he eventually found his way to Stanford in the US to complete a doctorate in education in the early 30s. When he was in the US, he received many of his influences around comprehensive education by looking at the schools around there, which are public comprehensive schools, and how they serve the communities around them. In 1935, he returned to Sydney. He married Beatrice Margaret Grieve in 1936, and then they moved to Roseville. In World War II, he served in the Administrative and Special Duties Division of the RAAF. And then in 1948, like Andrew said before, he was appointed to the Department of Education, first as Secretary and later on as Director General. It was there that he chaired that committee, which then led to the infamous Wyndham scheme. So before Sir Wyndham's reforms, students aged 12 would actually be allocated to secondary schools, where boys would typically study manual arts and descriptive geometry, and girls would study domestic arts and clerical work. Only a few would be able to go to what they called academic high school at that time and actually study languages and other subjects. These allocations to these high schools were actually made at the age of 12, right at the point of exit from primary school. And so Harold had an issue with this. So he said, the interest that he had in actually reforming the system came because of his guidance experience. It was clear to Sir Harold that a lot of students weren't finding the right path. He called this pupil wastage. So he said, pupils did not merely drop out. They were pushed out in many cases by lack of relevance in the curriculum and by the inevitability of failure. So Wyndham was really keen on fixing this situation, and that's what led to his Wyndham scheme. And as part of what drove, I guess, the scheme, this is another quote from Sir Wyndham. He said that at the time, the school system was going to be inundated with a significant uplift in student numbers. And this was unparalleled at any other time. Do they simply just build more of the same thing, like adding another wing to the factory that they already have? Or do they take stock and decide what kind of factory we want to build? And so Harold's insight and foresight at that time was what led to the comprehensive schools of today, of which I am one of the lucky participants. So we're here to think about how we're in a similar situation with AI. We're in this kind of place where something is coming, and we know it's coming. It's already kind of here, just like it was for Sir Wyndham. And to start thinking around that journey of AI and what its impacts are on education, I have some provocations for us. One of the provocations is this quote from an article. Why is the academic world so hostile to this thing? And why do students find it so hard to stay away? Also, this other quote. GPT is here to say, we should, as institutions of education, get more engaged with it rather than trying to deny that it exists. these quotes sound familiar to us because these are what our colleagues and ourselves have been saying to each other. But actually, these quotes were about Wikipedia. And these quotes were from articles about 8 years ago. But we're in kind of the same place, aren't we now? With Wikipedia, what was and what ChatGPT is now. And so it's interesting that to kind of think how we reacted to Wikipedia and how we are reacting to generative AI these days. One of the reasons why we had this reaction is because of generative AI's ability to write. And so this article came out in the Chronicle about a month ago, and this had this headline saying GPT-4, which is the most modern version of the AI, can already pass freshman year at Harvard. Okay. In the article, they said this: if college students are willing to use this tool, they should be able to get passing grades on all their essays with almost no work at Harvard, of all places. It's scary. And so this drove a lot of educators to think, okay, I've got my assessments. How can I AI-proof my assessments? How can I make it so AI can't do this, and so I can actually appropriately test my students' knowledge? So this is an interesting example here. This particular example of an assessment, which is a higher education level assessment, is contemporary. It requires students to draw on real references. It's personal and it's also authentic. Okay. Let me show you what AI can do with this. I'm going to copy and paste, and let's hope this live demonstration works. Often it doesn't, but let's keep it a go anyway. All right, I'm going to copy paste it into this this particular AI, and this AI is called Cite. So I'm going to ask this Cite AI this particular question, which is the first half of the assignment prompt. Okay? And the thing with Cite AI, what you'll see it's spinning is it's generating search strategies based on my prompt. It's then searching through its millions of papers, actual papers, with its billions of citations to each other, and then it's finding all those papers that are relevant, it's reading them at the speed of AI, and then it is putting together what you'll see soon, not only a reference list that it's curating now, but hopefully, if it works, it's also going to put together a response to me. Okay. If this doesn't work because the internet's a bit funny, let me show you one that I prepared earlier. But this is an interesting thing because it means that what we thought AI was capable of just 10 months ago when ChatGPT came out, AI has moved far beyond those already. Right? So it's doing funny things now. So I'm going to show you, AI is not perfect. I will show you one that I prepared earlier. Okay, here we go. So this is one that I prepared earlier on the same question. You can see that all these references are real references, and it's given a perfect English rendition of what all these references say about EALD learners. And then I could go back and say, okay, well, sure, this is all well and good, but this didn't really hit this second part of this thing. So for this, I'm going to use a different AI again. I'm going to use another AI called Bing Chat. And I'm going to use Bing Chat here because Bing Chat not only is powered by GPT-4, which is the most powerful AI available currently, but Bing Chat is also connected to the internet, which means that when it needs to, and it needs to now, you can see that it's searching the internet for live information about the New South Wales syllabus, about CALD students, and about public and personal world texts. And then it's reading all those results at the speed of AI, and it's generating these ideas for me. Okay. And so you can very quickly see that with a bit of prompting and a bit of use of different kinds of AIs, I haven't touched ChatGPT yet. Students can already start to address assessment requirements fairly easily. So this is part of the freak out in education right now. Then people will say, oh, well, that's fine. We just get our students to present in front of us. Then they can't possibly cheat. But then this article, or this post came out in Reddit about maybe 3 months ago now. It's been deleted since then, strangely. But as you can see from the title, I delivered a presentation completely made by AI and I got the full mark. They said, this was a presentation, though, that we didn't care about as a group. And they also said, for everyone in higher ed, I wish you the best of luck. So that's the kind of situation we're facing ourselves, or we're facing now in terms of AI and education. This was a report recently by McKinsey, just maybe a few weeks ago now. And you can see that the second row there about the occupations which are going to be most impacted by AI, education and training is second. Okay. Now, it's important to understand what this graph means. It's the occupations which are most impacted, not the occupations where most people will lose their jobs. The very important distinction there. Impacted doesn't mean you lose your job. Impact just means your world or your world of work will change because of AI. You can see STEM professionals, business, creatives, managers, all those kinds of people. A lot of our work will be affected. Okay? And it's affected because maybe AI can help us save time. And that's the main point of this particular graph, the amount of time, potential time-saving AI could afford us, okay? And hence how our work might change. Health professionals are one of them. They were, I think, third on the list. For them, it's an interesting experience as well. This paper was out maybe 2 months ago now, and this paper sought to compare the responses to patient questions between AI and also real doctors. So they gave a bunch of patient questions to real doctors gave the response, and then they gave the same questions to the AI, and AI gave their response. Okay? And then they gave those responses to other people to judge around quality and empathy. And you can guess who came out front. AI. AI was more empathetic and also had high quality responses by far compared to the human physicians. What an interesting kind of ability of AI to do this. What does it mean for us as a society? I think at this point, it's quite useful to take a step back and actually think, what is this magic? What is this strange thing that has appeared last year, at the end of last year, to kind of disturb, make a massive earthquake around everything that we're trying to do? And so I want to spend a little tiny bit of time demystifying these things called large language models, which is the foundation AI, which these tools are based on. These large language models are built on something called a neural network. And a neural network is actually very similar to how our brains work. In fact, the person, what they call the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, he actually built these artificial neural networks in order to study how human neural networks worked. And so the artificial neural networks look like this. It's just a bunch of nodes. It's algorithms connected to other nodes, other algorithms. Much like in our brains, our neurons are connected to other neurons. This New York Times Interactive, which is really quite useful, I'll show you some screenshots from it. This is where they've taken a very small artificial neural network and trained it on the words of Jane Austen, or 800,000 words. Okay, so they've taken this, what they call baby GPT, quite cute, and they've trained this baby GPT by reading 800,000 words of Jane Austen. At the very beginning of training, okay, it's just a neural network, artificial neural network. This neural network emitted this garble, okay, just like a newborn would when they come out. With no training, this is what the neural network does. With 250 rounds of training, so 250 rounds of reading Jane Austen, or 800,000 words of it, and correcting itself to make sure that it's actually producing proper language after it's finished training, this takes 30 seconds on a laptop computer. Okay, 30 seconds, it's already starting to utter some, some sensible things like yo and he and sus and okay. 30 more seconds, and it starts to introduce bigger words like that and on and be, nevers. 10 minutes, and it does this. Mostly English words, and mostly sensible words. After 1 hour of training this baby GPT, which is reading nothing except for Jane Austen, it's producing perfect Jane Austen. Okay? 1 hour of training on a laptop computer. That's what these artificial neural networks do. What is actually happening under the surface with these neural networks is that a bunch of text is going in on the left, the prompt that you give to the AI. These texts, these bits of text, these words are being transformed into these numbers, and the numbers are being fed through all these neurons in the network. At the end, more numbers come out, and those numbers are then back translated into text for us to read. Okay? All that's happening during the training of baby GPT is those connections, you can see the animation on the screen, those connections are changing every round of training. Okay? So the strength of the different connections between different neurons are changing every time the network trains. And then after those 30,000 rounds of training for baby GPT, it's able to produce Jane Austen just because of these mathematical relationships. It's quite interesting because this is an image of a 2-year-old brain section of a human. And what happens as a human being develops is these networks, again, form between these human neurons, just like the networks form and the different strengths form between the artificial neurons. And so in an eerily strange way, these artificial neural networks are learning just like we learn. This has important implications for how we understand and work with these AIs. AI is less like a database and more like a person, which is strange. It's like a person who has read a lot of books and everything on the internet, everything on Wikipedia. They estimate that for one human being to read the amount of text which GPT was trained on, it would take that human 22,000 years. So that's how much this machine has read in order to develop its massive neural network. It's not a baby GPT, it's GPT-3 or 4. It's got billions and billions of these neurons, okay, not just what we showed on the screen before. So it's a bit like a very well-read classmate. You can ask them questions. They may not know exactly what to answer you, but if you ask them the right question the right way, they might be able to dig deep into something they've remembered, and then kind of give you a response that sounds sensible. GPT is a bit like fire, okay? One, because it takes the oxygen out of the room, but also because it is powerful in the right hands and destructive in the wrong hands. And also, just like fire was, and just like the steam engine was, just like the internet, just like the mobile phone was, it is what people call a general purpose technology, which means that it has the ability to change society as we know it. Okay? So GPT is a GPT, a general purpose technology. GPT can, or generative AI can often be seen most usefully as like an assistant for us. Okay? So an assistant who you can ask lots of questions, but you wouldn't ever trust completely. You'd always check their work. And that's probably the most useful way to perceive these AIs. So when it comes to thinking about how to work with them as human beings, we think about how we work with technology generally. Okay, so we have this graph here, which is different levels of what we do and different levels of what technology does. On the bottom right, you may have things like robotic vacuum cleaners. A colleague of mine bought a Roomba in the same week as she bought a puppy. The puppy did an accident. The Roomba then spread the accident around the living room. So high technology contribution, but low human contribution, not always a good thing. During COVID, we experienced telehealth. The technology didn't do much. It helped us to Zoom our doctors. The doctor did most of it. It was a very high human contribution. But then we have other examples of digital cameras. You know, every time I hold this up and take a picture, a bunch of AI is working in here, technology is working in to make my picture look better. Piloting an airplane. We'd be quite scared these days to fly in an airplane which didn't have autopilot, right? But we'd also be scared if we had a pilot which didn't know how to fly without the autopilot. And so you need that kind of combination of both the technology and the human. And the same exists for AI. On the bottom right, you have the ideas of where you have a very low human contribution, but a high AI contribution. You have a situation where the AI does it for you. That's probably not where we want to go educationally. Top left and top right, I think is where we want to go as a society, as educationalists. We want to be in a situation where AI can help us do things, or we can actually collaborate with AI in the process of making something happen. So what does this look like, this human AI collaboration? Well, this is an interesting article from the BBC. This was from the 13th of June. The Beatles are apparently releasing a final track with all 4 singers in it, even though 2 have passed. And in this particular article, Paul McCartney writes how he was working with a vocal technologist to actually extract one of the Beatles' voices from an old track that they found. And that's what's going to go into this new track later on. Okay? AI functioning to create and collaborate with humans. And it's interesting that Paul McCartney says at the bottom, so it gives you some sort of leeway. That's the AI allowing some sort of flexibility, some sort of additional ability for the humans who are interacting with it. Zaha Hadid Architects. This architecture firm is globally renowned. I think they designed the stadium which was used for the London Aquatic Olympics. And in this particular article, which was early this year as well, their lead architect came out and said, we actually use AI for almost all the projects that we do. And they use it to come up with ideas. Because the AI has seen, not read this time, but seen so many images around the internet. This AI, in its neural network, it's able to create a lot of images too. And so what these architects do is that when they sit in front of a client, instead of having an architect scribble out some drawings, they tell the AI what to make. And then these allow the architects to have a much larger repertoire, which they can go to the clients and have these ideation sessions with. And it's interesting that they say this means that the ideas are still striking and it's a really potent way to work. So this is starting to go into the realm of generative AI, which is like ChatGPT, but for images instead of for text. Then you have this example here, which is also recently out from NSWIeR in the UK. So they thought about, well, how can this help educators, early year educators? And so they came up with all these ideas. You might not be able to see, it's very small, but they have ideas like it can generate children's books. There's actually a website, I think it's called Bedtime Stories on AI or something, and you can go there and you can actually generate bedtime stories for your kid, and you can inject them into the bedtime story. What an amazing thing. I wish I had that when my kids were young. Generate learning content, draft newsletters, create learning exercises, create flashcards, illustrations, augment teacher knowledge, all these kinds of things. The amazing possibilities open to us now, potentially through AI. Which kind of leads, which did lead Bill Gates to very early on this year say the age of AI has finally begun. We're in this AI summer, as he calls it now. And he says this new technology can help people everywhere improve their lives, but we need to establish the rules of the road, okay? Because AI is filled with opportunities, yes, and we've seen a lot of those, but it's also filled with lots of risks and therefore responsibilities. And so some of these risks, copyright is a really important thing. A lot of these stronger AIs have been trained on work which has been copyrighted and not really released for these purposes. And so there's lawsuits currently happening in the US, for example, with OpenAI, which is a company that made ChatGPT, and they're being sued for using these copyrighted words in order to train their AI. This AI has read the books which were copyrighted. Is that allowed? It's an interesting question because we read books which are copyrighted too. And then we kind of build our networks based on that reading. What does that mean for us and when we generate things? Copyright is also an issue when it comes to things that AI produces. So by Australian law, anything that the AI produces cannot be copyrighted because you need to be a human being to own the copyright. Okay? So on the in and on the out, there's issues around copyright. Bias. If you send the prompt, CEOs standing in front of a building to some of these image generating AIs, this is what they'll produce. White males folding their arms. Right? AI has a huge bias, but it's not the fault of the AI, it's the fault of humans, because we write that males, CEOs standing in front of buildings are the thing. And traditionally in history, that's what has been in society. And so there's a huge amount of bias in these neural networks because of the training data, which is biased because of us as humans. There's a big impact on human labor too. There was a big piece out in Time magazine earlier this year talking about how Kenyan workers had been paid only $2 an hour to basically sift through a whole bunch of really explicit damaging material in order to protect the AI from being trained by that material. Okay, that comes with a real human cost. Also, it comes with a massive environmental cost. There's a estimation that every chat that goes through ChatGPT drinks about 500 mils of water, and also has a massive cost on CO2 in the environment. Right? And as the use of these tools increase across the world, we have to ask ourselves as a society, what are we doing about the environment? And what's the impact there? Privacy as well. The information that we or our students or our kids might feed into the AI, depending on the privacy settings, the privacy policy of these companies, that information may be retained for future training runs. It doesn't affect the current neural network, but it might affect the future neural network. Okay? So what is the implication there? And truth. Just like when Wikipedia came out, a lot of academics were saying this is the end of truth as we know it. But now they're saying similar things about generative AI. How do we know what is truth? And I think given all that is happening around fake news and those kind of things, I think it's a particularly pressing question for us. So what does it mean for educators? We've touched on a few of these examples already. This is a really nice video, which is 8 years old already. And so I've cut little bits of it, and so it might jump around at various points. But we'll watch this and we'll have a think about what it actually is it's trying to tell us to give me a little break from talking and you listening to me talking. Let's try to play this.
This will revolutionize education. No prediction has been made as often or as incorrectly as that one. In 1922, it was Thomas Edison who declared that the motion picture is destined to revolutionize our educational system, and that in a few years it will supplant largely, if not entirely, the use of textbooks. Yeah, and you know how that worked out? By the 1930s, it was radio. The idea was you could beam experts directly into classrooms, improving the quality of education for more students at lower cost. And that would mean you require fewer skilled teachers, a theme common to all of the proposed education revolutions, like that of educational television in the 1950s and 60s. Nowadays, plenty of things are poised to revolutionize education, like smartboards, smartphones, tablets, and MOOCs. Those are massive open online courses. And some believe we're getting close to a universal teaching machine, a computer so quick and well programmed that it's basically like having your own personal tutor in a machine. A student could work through well-structured lessons at their own pace, receiving immediate and personally tailored feedback, and all without the interference of a meddlesome and expensive teacher. Do these claims sound familiar? Over the past 100 years, a lot of areas of life have been revolutionized, but education is not one of them. By and large, students are still taught in groups by a single teacher, and that is not what a revolution looks like. Some might blame this state of affairs on the inertia of our educational institutions. It's just too hard to get a huge bureaucracy to change. But I think the reason technology hasn't revolutionized education is something else. Something that goes to the very heart of what education is. So why do we need teachers? Well, if you think that the fundamental job of a teacher is to transmit information from their head to their students, then you're right, they are obsolete. I mean, you probably imagine a classroom where this teacher is spewing out facts at a pace which is appropriate for one student, too fast for half and too slow for the rest. Luckily, the fundamental role of a teacher is not to deliver information. It is to guide the social process of learning. The job of a teacher is to inspire, to challenge, to excite their students to want to learn. Yes, they also do explain and demonstrate and show things, but fundamentally, that is beside the point. The most important thing a teacher does is make every student feel like they are important, to make them feel accountable for doing the work of learning. For as transformative as each new technology seems to be, like motion pictures or computers or smartboards, what really matters is what happens inside the learner's head. And making a learner think seems best achieved in a social environment with other learners and a caring teacher.
So I love that video. I've played it to my own students here in this room, actually, because I think it goes down to the basics of what education is about. When it comes to generative AI in education, it's interesting that Derek almost foresees it happening. This digital Aristotle is kind of here, isn't it? So when students perceive generative AI and what it's doing, there's been a few studies around the world. This one came from Sweden. It was a few thousand students earlier this year, and they basically said students have accepted it. Okay, have we? Not sure. The students have. They're cautious though about it, and they know that they need to be careful around these technologies. They know that it's a supplement to the teachers, not a replacement, which is quite an interesting finding. They know that it helps them save time, and they really want guidance. They want their teachers, their institutions to actually help them understand these things, how to use them properly. And so what we've done at Sydney is a bunch of students approached us and said, well, we see our students, our colleagues, our peers, are not actually knowing how to use these technologies very well. They're struggling with it. And that means there's going to be a massive digital divide between the people who know how to use it and people who don't know how to use it, people who can save time with it and people who don't. And so they helped us to generate this site, which is public, bit.ly/studentsai. And on that site, they've helped us to build all these resources that other students around the world can use to learn how to use this AI as well. So what they said to us is basically, we want to democratize knowledge and skill about this for other students. And then they worked with us to produce this thing. And so on that site, they said, what we would like as students is to know what it is, what the rules are around it, but most importantly, how to use it. What are some examples of things that we can do as students to use this effectively for our learning and also for our lives? So when the students approached us, they also said, we're a bit confused about assessment. Okay, our teachers are telling us different things. Some of our teachers don't know what to do. And what is this kind of reality that we're in right now? The reality I think that we're in is any take-home assessment could involve AI use. You can't really detect it, okay? People are predicting that Gen AI will, and already has started to, infuse the way that we work and live. And also the evidence from multiple papers says that we can't really detect the use of generative AI. All this kind of leads us to the conclusion that we can't really outrun it. Okay, it's a fool's errand trying to outrun AI. Just as we saw very early on in that demonstration, the AI just in 10 months has advanced so far that it does things that we thought were once impossible. So if we can't outrun or outdesign AI, maybe this means that any take-home assessment maybe should involve AI use. One of our registrar actually here at Sydney, he's been working in the academic integrity space for many years. One of the AI in Education working group meetings, he said this: we might be at a stage when an authentic assessment is the use of AI. You know, what an amazing statement from a person who's so heavily invested in academic integrity. That right now, where we stand as educators, authentic assessment actually is the use of AI. That's how pervasive AI is. So what we're trying to do at the university here is think about how do we help our academics work through this. And so we've developed this strange idea called a two-lane approach to assessment. So I've got an example for you on the screen. This example, the learning outcomes which this assessment is trying to evaluate is around whether or not students can actually look at the social, political, and other trends that are facing education. And so what we might have is a situation where we have first lane, which is where we have assurance of learning, and the second lane, where we have students actually working with AI. And in the second lane, what we have maybe is Bing Chat, because it's connected to the internet. We have Cite AI, which we saw before as well. And we have Adobe Firefly to help students do other things too. So students use AI, encouraged and trained how to use AI in order to produce something or do something in the assessment. But what is important is not the product. What is important is the process of collaborating with the AI. So the students would document this AI, this collaboration process. They would critique it, they would reflect on it, and those kinds of things. And then this process is what is most heavily weighted. We are not interested in 1,000 students. Sorry, we are not interested in 1,000 students writing 1,000 analyses of this thing. Okay, 1,000 essays. We're not interested in those 1,000 essays. But what we are interested in is we're interested in 1,000 students learning this process of analysis. But then how can we be sure if all they're doing is collaborating with AI? Therefore, we need lane one. Lane one is where you do things which are supervised, which are invigilated, which are live. And that's where you kind of confirm that the students know what they know. Okay? But primarily what we're trying to drive here at Sydney is we're trying to drive people into lane two, because we know lane two will motivate students to learn and they will excite them about their subject. And lane one is necessary because we have requirements to TEXA and to the government to actually prove that our students know what they do. But the problem here is that all this requires work, and teachers everywhere are exhausted. Teachers in K-12, teachers in university, we're all fed up and burnt out apparently. And so how on earth do we do this? Maybe AI is not just part of the problem, but also part of the solution. I've got this prompt here to show you AI in action. Let me just tab out and I'll run this on AI. So for this one, what we're doing here is we're saying, well, maybe AI can actually help teachers with things. So this is put yourself in the footsteps of a geography teacher. What are some environmental trends? Based on these trends, then make some predictions. Okay. So what I might do as a teacher is I might come through to, actually I might use Bing for this one. I might come through to the AI and I'll pop that in. And then the AI will search the internet because it can. And then see environmental trends across Asia Pacific. And then it will come up with the contemporary issues that are facing APAC right now. And after it generates these things, because of the particular way I've asked it the question, hopefully what it'll do is it'll give me some prompts that I can take into a different AI to do something else with. Okay. So here we go. So those are the trends. Here are the potential future states. Okay. And as a geography teacher, this might take me, half a day to look up. But because I've got the help of AI, it's saving all that time in preparing this for my class. So what I can do at this point is I'm going to go into a different AI, and this AI is called Firefly. And hopefully my internet works for this. Okay, and while Firefly is loading, I'm going to come over here to this AI and take some of the ideas that oh, there we go. This is a particularly poignant one. Can I highlight this? Oh, it's still generating, I think. Okay, I'm going to stop that. I'm going to come over here and copy that thing. And then back in Firefly, I'm going to come and ask Firefly to generate me an image. I'm going to then feed the outputs of one AI and take it into another AI. And this AI will then generate me, what did I ask it? A barren field with hungry children holding empty bowls. Okay. And as a teacher, I may have had to look online for hours to find these images, but if the thing works, oh, that's a bit cartoonish. Okay, let me change it so it's a photo and then regenerate. But what I've done is for my class, I've been able to generate this stimulus material that they can then use for discussion. Okay. So AI may not be just part of the problem, but it may also be part of the solution for us as teachers and as educators. Another thing that's probably worth mentioning is that, I guess, let's go to this one. There are some fundamental truths about teaching that will never change. Okay? Good pedagogy is still good pedagogy, even in the face of AI. Students, though, will be using AI, and we have to help them. Our teaching can look different because of AI, and we need to really make a move on the assessment because that is a really key, I guess, challenge with AI. And I think that's what we've seen is AI can, in different ways, if we know how to use it well, make all our lives easier. And importantly, our role as educators is really critical to make sure AI is used well. Okay? We have the responsibility to us, ourselves, our colleagues, and also our students. So to end up on some big questions, authenticity. What if I told you that this talk up to now was completely generated by AI? How would you feel? Nolene has her eyes, popped out eyes. How would you feel? Unsure? When I asked that same question to a similar presentation I gave at UNSW, they said, I would feel cheated. And I think that's valid. It wasn't. I didn't use AI to generate this at all. It was all human made. But it's an interesting thought, isn't it? As a society, we're not ready for it. We're not ready for this human AI collaboration yet. Because there's something inside us that says the human needs to be the person who does it, not the AI, or even the AI working with a human. It needs to be the human. And so Capgemini, it's a consulting firm in the international consulting firm. They came up with this idea of a trust mark, which is interesting. I'm not saying this is what we should do, but it's an interesting provocation. They said that maybe in the future we're going to have the situation where we need a stamp that says this is original human thinking, another stamp which says this was AI supported thinking. Just like we have at Woolies, we have 100% Australian beef, and we know that's guaranteed Australian beef. We have original human thinking. Okay? Is that where we're headed as a society in terms of AI? Also, who decides what should be AI-able? What should be given to AI? It's often said that AI reduces these boring and tedious tasks, but the thing is, who decides what a boring task is? Okay? We have a spectrum here, things which AI can do, which things that humans can do. There's things that only humans can do and things that only AI can do. Okay, we can't read 22,000, we can't read for 22,000 years, but AI can, okay? But then where do different activities we do as educators lie on this? Lesson planning, we've seen examples of, generating images and generating ideas around geography. Is this something that is allowable? Where on the spectrum does it sit? What about making rubrics that teachers use to mark? Is this an acceptable way of using AI? What about marking? Should this be just a human endeavor? Will we ever trust AI with this? Will our students trust AI with it? What about giving feedback? Will our students be appreciative or will they feel cheated if they get AI composed feedback? But assignments, will we feel cheated if we have students completing assignments with AI? What about staying up to date? All that PD that we need to do, professional development we need to do to keep up to date. Why don't we get AI to summarize that for us? It saves lots of time. What about emails to parents? That takes lots of time. What about reports to executive? Whereas maybe an executive wouldn't see it like that, but we would see it like this. Okay? So who decides where on the spectrum these things sit? Also, the question for us is, what is AI capable of? This was a recent paper out just over the weekend, actually, and they basically gave a bunch of consultants from the Boston Consulting Group a fictional scenario. And they told the consultants to either work with AI or not work with AI. Okay? And what they found is in almost all cases, the consultants which worked with AI did far higher quality recommendations at a much lower, much faster speed compared to consultants who didn't use AI. Okay, so then they said that there's this kind of frontier of things that AI can do well, things that AI can't do well. But the thing is, they had one particular activity in this study where AI just flunked at. It couldn't do well at all. And the consultants who used AI actually did worse than the consultants who didn't use AI. And they think it's because the line between tasks that AI can handle well and AI can't handle well is actually not smooth, like it's jagged. Okay, they call it the jagged frontier. And in some situations, you might have things where AI is surprisingly capable, generating ideas. Who would have thought that a machine could generate ideas almost as well as human can? Okay. Or places where AI is surprisingly incapable. So doing basic maths, counting number of words in a sentence, AI can't do that well, or these ChatGPTs can't at least. So then the idea behind this is, in the paper, it says that it's really important that when you use AI, it's important to have skill in that domain. It's important to have hands-on experience and practice with AI, and also have a good understanding of that collaboration between humans and AI. And that's what is really important in trying to move forward with AI. This is an article out from Wired. And in this article, it's quite a nice read, actually. It talks about what OpenAI, which is the creators of ChatGPT, are actually trying to do. And apparently what they're trying to do is they're trying to release these AIs into the world before this thing called artificial general intelligence comes. AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is an AI which can do everything a human can do and possibly better. We're not there yet. Okay? Many things GPT-4 can do, we can do as well, or many things we can do, GPT-4 can do as well, but we're not quite at AGI yet. But the reason why OpenAI apparently want to release GPT-4 and these kind of powerful AIs onto the world is they want the world to prepare for AGI, which may be, depending on who you talk to, coming in the next 2 to 50 years. Okay, what will education look like then? What will our lives look like then? Scary to think. And so I think this comes to think about, well, what is the human value add? In this world of normalizing human AI collaborations, what do we add as humans? Is it critical thinking? GPT-4 critically thinks pretty well, just like we saw with the Boston study. Is it culture? We have experienced, lived culture, but then GPT has read 22,000 years worth of material of culture. And so it also doesn't understand it, but it has it in its network somewhere. Is it creativity? They did I think a comedian did an experiment where they tried to get GPT to make jokes, and they were actually funnier than human jokes. Is it curiosity? I don't think AI is there yet with curiosity. Maybe that's what makes us human. Or is it connection? Just like Derek said, I think the most important thing that we could do as teachers is to connect and build a relationship with our students. What is the human value add in this brave new world of AI and humans? So to borrow from Sir Harold Wyndham's quote that we saw at the very beginning, we are confronted now with a beginning of a rise of AI, and it's unparalleled in other times of history. Do we simply teach and assess the way that we always have been? Add another wing to the factory, or do we try and take stock and decide what kind of education we build together? I think that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Thank you for your time. Yep, so we might open for Q&A at this point. Got a few on the chat and also a few in the Q&A. So how do we want to run this?
Then while I was looking through those, I do have an opening question, and this just wrestling with this idea of how much we need to be developing the skill of information seeking and how much we need to develop information knowing. And in rippling through your presentation, this balance, this juggling act sort of came through quite a bit. For example, if you ask it the right question in the right way, it will give good information, but that requires the student to know a fair bit in order to ask the right question. That quadrant of AI and human requires the human to know a fair bit to optimize where things sit in that quadrant. And so what's going forward, how much do teachers need to make sure kids still need to know? Because at the moment, that's what we ask of them largely. You come out at the end of school knowing a lot of stuff, knowing how to do a lot of things, but also knowing a lot of stuff, very content heavy. Where do we go in that balance? What's the role of teaching and education in getting that balance? Because you can't ask it good stuff if you don't know a fair bit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question that we're all grappling with at different levels of education. And that's kind of what led us to think about that two-lane approach to assessment, because even at higher education, where we expect students to be extremely autonomous and be able to know their stuff quite well, we still need to kind of confirm that. In secondary and primary, we also need to confirm that as well. I think generative AI is potentially more dangerous. Generative AI for me, it doesn't really belong in primary. Because at that point, they're picking up really fundamental skills that they shouldn't be using AI for, because they don't have the skills to then be able to judge, evaluate, improve on AI's work. In higher education, I think there's more of a purpose for AI, because we're preparing people for the workforce, for future work, and this will be part of that future work. And so there's a good place for AI in higher ed. But for secondary ed, I think that's the most dangerous, because they're still kind of developing their foundational knowledge. But they're also smart and skilled and proficient enough to actually use these AIs in different ways. And so I think that's the real danger. So I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah,
I know that we need to fix it.
Yeah. Wow. And if there's any questions in the audience as well, we welcome those.
Just have a comment on the chat here. Just say thank you for your talk.
Cool, thank you.
There's one from Roger as well. Danny, can you see that?
Yep. Oh, let me read that out because I can't. Can I zoom this up? No, I can't do that one up. Okay, I'll read this out. So apart from adapting our assessments, etc., how do teachers know how to prepare our students to be successful in an AI world when by the time they leave school, AI will be totally different from now? That's a fantastic question. Yeah, even in the last 10 months, AI is radically different. In December, Google was going to release this thing they're calling Gemini. How freaky a name is that? Gemini is meant to be more powerful than GPT-4. And what kind of capabilities they'll have, we don't know. So I think that's a fantastic question. I think we need to build in students the ability to be flexible and be adaptable in this new environment. We need to prepare our students to kind of have the basic AI literacy in order to deal with these situations, to understand the ethics and the principles behind it. But fundamentally, we may not be able to teach our students how to use these AIs because the AIs will change. But what we can give our students is some principles for how to engage productively and responsibly with these AIs. Good question.
There's a question from Ann Power at the top there, Danny.
How does AI counter what Wyndham called pupil wastage? Yeah, great question. Is it only time saved? Is about collaborating with AI outputs? So Wyndham's pupil wastage was about students being put into classes or schools where they didn't belong. And it's an interesting idea that are students doing subjects with us where they don't feel motivated to do? And there's a potential perhaps for AI to help teachers figure out ways to motivate their students more, or for students to do some self-discovery using the AIs out there. And so possibly, but possibly not to the extent that Wyndham's own scheme actually fixed the problem.
Can you see the next question there?
Yep, so anonymous.
Two-lane approach requires a greater involvement of time and work.
Yep, so two-lane approach requires a greater involvement of time and work from the academics. How do we integrate this into the current business model of the university? It's a fantastic question. I think that comes down to that, yeah, we're all exhausted, people working in any sector of education. And I think part of the answer has to be AI, unfortunately. We have to figure out how we can use AI to save us time. We have to figure out things that we shouldn't be doing anymore because AI exists. And then use that extra time to then build those connections with our students. Yeah, we need to use it. Yeah.
I'm curious in terms of the higher education teaching. How do you think AI is going to change their pedagogy?
Oh, Interesting.
Because a lot, we're slow. We're the slowest.
Yeah. So higher education institutions are renowned for being glacial at movements. I think it's got almost the most potential for higher education though, because we marking, rubrics, feedback, lesson planning, consulting with students, emails to them, a whole bunch of things that take us time right now can be not prevented, but helped along with AI. And so I think there's a huge amount that we can actually do if we.
That's our administrators.
The pedagogy, sorry, yes, okay. So I didn't get to show you this. We ran out of time, but I think one of the things that we're exploring here in Sydney is the idea that if teachers can control these chatbots and get the chatbots to do certain things and steer them in certain directions, then they can release these chatbots to their students. And these chatbots will be able to follow the teacher's directions and be able to help the students in particular ways. So one example that we're going to pilot hopefully this semester is we have a person in occupational therapy, health sciences. And so part of one of their units is they need their students to learn how to work with a teacher to develop solutions for students who need help in terms of occupational therapy in schools. And so they want to build a chatbot which basically pretends to be the teacher in different contexts. And then the students can then work with that teacher in order to kind of say, here's what I've designed, what do you think? And the chatbot will say, this wouldn't work in my context because of X. And the student would say, okay, well, this is why we think it might work. And so there's that idea of augmentation of teachers' abilities, as long as they can be the ones in charge of the AI. Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, what about the problem that some of this may become redundant in that as they can also already pass a undergraduate Harvard law degree, then there's going to be a lot of jobs, surely, contract work, lots of low-level law jobs, which simply won't be something people will want to learn, and students won't come to do them, because why would you do something you're never going to get a job in? What do we think about that?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Programmers, for example, ChatGPT can write code faster than any human can.
Yeah.
Not always perfect code, but yes. So I think I was speaking with a student from UTS a couple of months ago. She's a journalism student, and she made the mistake of interviewing me about AI. And then at the end of it, she asked, do you have any questions? And I said, what do you feel about your future? As a student in journalism, where AI can write copy better than you can, faster than you can, what do you feel about your future? And she thought for a bit and she said, I'm not so worried, because journalism is about relationships, not writing. And I think that's so true, because investigative journalism, which is what she's studying, is about the connection that humans can build with each other in order to get sources, to get information, to get those connections going. And AI can never replicate that. And
yeah,
so
but it can certainly write a contract, and nobody will give a stuff whether it's funded by a human or not, and it'll be cheap and it'll be fast, and people are going to use it.
Yeah, and in paralegal as well. So I think what's going to happen in those situations is graduates and their employers will need to figure out what the human value add is. So for journalism, it's the relationships. For paralegals, it might be the critique or the analysis or the integration of multiple sources of information that AI may not be able to do. Yeah, but it's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, departments could be halved in 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's a real risk of AI.
Yeah,
definitely.
Someone would like to ask any questions? Yes.
Thank you. I think one of the challenges is how fast this space is moving. I'm really intrigued about what you're doing at USyd here. So I'm in the secondary context, and it appears to me that there's very little consensus about what is the appropriate use and inappropriate use. Some are like, Grammarly, you can't use that. I'm like, oh gosh. And so what's your advice on trying to build some sort of shared understanding of what is okay and what is not okay? Maybe a reflection on how you develop your two-tier model would be helpful for us trying to figure out how to develop some sort of meaningful and equitable and just system in whatever context we find ourselves.
Oh, that's a tricky question. I I think you need to engage all the stakeholders. You need to engage parents and students and the teachers. You need to engage universities, the companies perhaps who are building these tools, have those conversations around it. I think the shared understanding will also change depending on what these tools can do in the future. And so I think all we can do now, and what we've been trying to do in Sydney, is we've tried to stay away from hard and fast rules, apart from some very firm guardrails, like don't put private information there. Okay. But what we have tried to do is develop principles, which are not really, you can't really argue with principles. Things like your use has to be safe, your use has to be acknowledged, your use has to be transparent, these kind of things. And so I think if you can develop principles, that will give you a really good compass steer, as opposed to needing to do that from the get-go.
Yeah, thank you.
Tricky. There's a few questions online, but time. I don't mind. People are happy to.
Maybe to close, then someone's asking you to have a stab on when was the AGI.
That was the AGI. Oh man.
You said between 2 and 50 years, but did you know it now?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I think I'm not the programmers who build these amazing things. I think the best thing that we could do is we probably need to work towards a 2-year horizon, just in case. But it's probably going to be longer than that. But I think we don't want to be in a similar place as we were in November last year, thinking, my gosh, what has happened when AGI comes? Because by then it'll be much too late, because AGI will be so good. Yeah, which is a scary thought.
Thank you so much. Before I officially thank Demi, I'd like to thank all of you for coming, and everybody online and everybody in the room here. My name's Nolene Weatherby-Fell. I have the honour of being the president of the New South Wales Institute for Educational Research. This wonderful Wyndham lecture is a tradition for us, and we're so glad to bring it back in real life. What I do need to do, though, is very much thank Danny. Not only has he educated us, but in fact, it's that wonderful thing of, are there just more questions? And I think that's a really powerful thing for us. His considered presentation has helped us to reflect on what things may look like in the future as we move forwards, and certainly, again, echoing Sir Harold's words as well. We do need to collaborate, and I think that has come very clear that we need to work together, and there needs to be a shared knowledge and understanding. And so, as we do this new path, please, Danny, accept this as a little token of our appreciation. For everybody here and online, the recording is going to be uploaded onto the New South Wales IER website. It won't happen instantaneously. It won't happen as quickly as AI can seem to work, but it will happen. And we look forward to seeing you next year. Certainly, we look forward to welcoming you as members of the New South Wales IER. Could you join me in thanking Jenny?